Shalom! Thanks for joining me for an exciting new episode of High Voltage. I'm your host, I'm best-selling international author, MacKenzie Nelson. And again, I just want to say how much I appreciate you tuning in. If this is your first time, welcome, welcome. This podcast is a continuation of the book I wrote called My Father's Feathers. So a lot of the topics are generated conversationally from things I have touched on previously in the book. So if you're looking for more background into a lot of the stories I share, you can find most of them here. Some are fresh and new and inspired, basically on whatever I feel led to discuss on a weekly basis. Sometimes I never know what my topic will be until the day of. And that is so true to this episode. I really felt on my heart when I woke up today that this show needs to be about preferences over people. Meaning, I touched on this last week in my episode where I talked about the woman at the well who was me. I'm sure you caught on to that if you listened to it. And it was a church group I was a part of. If you want to know more, head back to last week's episode 39, meaning this is our 40th episode. I'm so excited. If you've been with me along this journey, I know it hasn't been an easy one, but that is where my heart is, right? I'm walking through, estrangement with my whole maternal side of the family. Since the book was published, my father, Paul, was diagnosed with not one, but 2 forms of cancer. He is currently receiving very heavy treatment. So if you could just keep him in your prayers. He still has a very positive attitude about that. So while I'm estranged from my whole family, my father has cancer and I am live on this podcast, just sharing my heart and sharing the journey with you all to keep you posted, because I believe I am positioning myself in faith to watch God show up and bring healing on multiple fronts. And like I said, these updates are a continuation. I talk a lot about what my battle specifically with estrangement from my family has really looked like. In addition, I walked through a chronic pain health journey where I was hospitalized at one point, trying to understand why I was having all of these horrific symptoms. And I cover that in here as well. So today, preferences over people. Last week I touched on it. In the group The Well, I saw a bunch of the women leaders really, their heart was positioned more on their own opinions, their own preferences. And I was just watching these get in the way, as person after person was being leveled by preferential treatment by these leaders. They were not leading with their heart and with a heart of God, meaning you've got to look past, right? I used Regina last week for an example. She's into holistic medicine. So anyone coming in and sitting at her table as the table leader who was more on a pharmaceutical route, meaning taking medication, she refused to pray over. She felt very uncomfortable with that, and she let that get in the way of ministering to someone else. So this carries over further into our day-to-day existence, not just at churches, where preferences, people who you prefer to hang out with versus people who are just needing to be noticed, right? Needing to be seen by you. While you're distracted with your preferences and who you're hanging out with at the church, you're missing these people who are just falling through the cracks, who are not being acknowledged because they're not your preferential friends or people you've known for a long time. I saw that time and time again. If someone wasn't familiar to the leadership, staff, or church, they just fell through the cracks. They were not acknowledged. They did not get the same treatment as the people, who were there and known. They were just kind of, shoved aside, for lack of a better term. And I see this happening not just in the church, but societally, right? Like, what would it hurt you when you're standing in line at the grocery store and there's someone in front of you, having a hard time, or just to acknowledge their pain? What does that cost? It's a free thing that we could do as a community for one another. Even on the road, I see some people, prefer to drive 40 in a 45, while other people prefer to go, 55 in a 45. But everyone's getting angry because maybe, your speed preference is different than the person over here. And I'm just watching, I've spoke about this before on the show, our society kind of get less and less patience with one another. And all of these public situations I'm watching really feels like since the onset of the pandemic. We had a lot of grace for each other during the pandemic, I felt like, but as, we're getting out of that and now, we're in 2023, I feel like all of that is gone and we're just so impatient with one another as a society because we're getting upset that people don't have the same preferences that we do, the same opinions that we do. And I'm watching more and more factions of friend groups kind of pop up. And it's almost like if you don't have the same political subset as someone else, like back in the 90s, I can remember like people joking about who's running for office and like, I'm voting for this guy, and someone else like, I'm voting for this guy, and they would kind of laugh about it. Whereas flash forward, to 2023, it's a completely different social status in terms of how we are discussing these issues. There doesn't seem to be that grace or that banter that's happening. And as we are coming into a new election year, 2024, I already feel this political pull and tension and just something I want to put out there for you to be cognizant of, for you to be aware of. Do you want to know where I stand politically? I keep that pretty locked down because I don't want the focus of me to be me aligning with any political party. I want the focus to be on my heart and loving and meeting everyone where they are at. So I do not, and you will not find me posting about political stances. I will support certain candidates like I did for local elections, but it's not a party line thing for me. I pray into the person and I talk to the person and I use discernment whether or not I feel I can back that person. I don't see it as backing a party. I see it as backing a person. Locally, I have the ability to get to know some of these people, but not on the national scale. So I can't apply the same methodology to backing a national candidate as I would someone local who I have the ability to get to know on that scale. So as we are heading into this tumultuous election, just something to really think about. Is your opinion, is your preference of a candidate really worth, that friendship you've established? Or is it really worth, the love and how you've led your life? Is it worth compromising all of that just so you can engage in a conversation that's probably going to be pretty divisive considering who you are talking with? Some people conversationally can still have, good conversations about politics, but really what I've seen in the last, 3 years is it's been extremely divisive. And I think it's great that you have your own preferences and that we have our own opinions. I believe it's so important because no one else has walked our journey out. So you can't expect, right? You have your opinions, you have your preferences from your own specific set of lived experiences, and no one else has that. And I see so many people looking for that, verification, that check mark that they are, walking out things the correct way, or they're looking for an agreement for someone to say, yes, I think the exact same way you do, when I tend to surround myself with people who do think differently. Because the more people you are around that are like-minded, the harder it really is for you to discern, is this something I really believe, or is this something that I am simply just going with the flow because they think the same way? So it's easy to get caught in a crowd mentality if you're not, being looking for people who actively have different opinions, different viewpoints. And it can really benefit you if you're able to speak in love to people that have different experiences, different viewpoints. I've learned so much conversationally from people who have had such different journeys from me. But if we're gonna let our preferences and our opinions, we're gonna hold on to them so stringently and so tightly that we refuse to have any sort of an open mind, we're gonna miss out on people who could really bring such variety and spice and life and can help you see things in a different light that otherwise, if you're around everyone that thinks the same way you do, who's gonna be able to show you anything different than what you already know? You're just surrounding yourself with yes men all the time, then you're really never gonna be challenged. And the Bible talks about this, says as iron sharpens iron, we need to look for friendships that are really enriching our lives, challenging us to grow in love and in these other areas. It shouldn't be an argumentative happening with a lot of combativeness. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about people who are loving and kind and are willing to take their opinions and their preferences and kind of put them on the side for a bit to hear what you might think that's a little different than what they believe, but really be like, maybe there is something to that. Maybe the way I've thought about it, it's called growth. And just because someone thinks differently on a subject now than they did 5 years ago, that doesn't mean they're a liar. I see this all the time. Like, well, she did think this and now she's saying this. I know she said this, but now she's saying this. And it's like, yes, it's called growth. If you are someone who is growing, you're reading, you're learning, you're talking to God, you are invested in friendships to enrich your self-growth, your opinions, preferences should and will change over time because you're inputting new knowledge and wisdom consistently and constantly. But if you're not willing to input information that's a little different than what you already believe, then where are you ever challenging yourself? Where is the growth happening? You're not being sharpened. Your blade is dull. And here at High Voltage, I'm always gonna challenge you to live a life on fire, to get excited about your life, to be passionate and purposeful about every decision you make. It starts up here, and then from our thoughts, we decide what we're going to do, and then we act on it. And through a series of our actions, we're actually compiling and living out all of these decisions. And then the next day, we are living with the consequences of the decisions. I like to say, I need to set future MacKenzie up for success. And that is my heart and my mindset. Some days, I'm sorry, future MacKenzie, but present MacKenzie needs a nap. But that's just real life. And I'm always honest in this show about things I'm struggling with, but this is where you get to see my growth. And I'm challenging you to do the same. Don't put your preferences over people. The next time you're driving on that road and someone's going real slow, you never know, they could be saving you from a ticket. That actually happened to me one time. I was so frustrated driving behind this slow driver, like, oh my gosh, like, this is taking forever. And as I'm getting a little frustrated, all of a sudden I look over and beep, beep, there's a cop taking radar. And I'm like, oh, thank God he just spared me from a speeding ticket. So you just never know. Other people have shared stories about how there's the slow car in front of them and they're frustrated and it spared them from an accident. I believe that there is a reason why sometimes God slows us down. Sometimes it is intentional and he's trying to show you something. That this life is a life that he has planned by design, not just for me, but for you. There's a purpose, a reason, and a destiny for each one of us. And it is up to us whether we want to latch on and connect to that spiritual lifeline that God is always offering us, no matter where you've been, where you are, or where you're going. He is in all of it. He's in every breath. And he wants you to succeed. He wants you to team up with him so he can show you that love that presides over every preference. that love for one another societally needs to supersede our opinions and our preferences, because he is in all of it and he's bigger than all of it. And each one of us that's alive right now is connected. You know, that person that you're putting down or you're leaving out or you're ignoring because they look a little different. They may talk a little funny, look a little funny. Well, you're connected. That's your brother. That's your sister. Look out for one another. Love each other. And if you have to take your opinions and your preferences off to do so, do it. Do it every single time. I have my own thoughts, my own preferences, but I take them off when I'm having conversations with others. And I truly look to meet people where they're at, to learn about them, to listen to where they're coming from, and then to have conversation from that place. It's not all about me. I think it's more about learning about the other person and just having the open heart and the open mind to see where that conversation takes you. It will enrich your life, and it could change your life, save your life, if you would just let down your pretenses long enough to let love override all of it. Because it's possible. This is how I live my life every day. I fearlessly walk into conversation after conversation, looking with all my heart to help another person feel seen, feel heard, to know they matter, they are valued and worthy. This is my purpose and my destiny, and this is how I live my life, and you can too. Just put it all aside, take it off like a uniform and say, today, love will reign. I'm going to shed my preferences in exchange for showing someone else that they matter, that they're seen. And this, friends, is how we change everything, one person at a time, one heart at a time. Thank you so much for joining me today. I pray you have a fabulous weekend. I hope you're having a great summer, and I'll catch you again next week. Thanks, guys.